Congratulations! This far, I feel very happy to see you still with me, learning and being with me to this very far. Basic email structure. Now, of course, you've seen you now have an email address. Okay, you have an email address with Gmail. If you have that one with Yahoo, it's okay, or any other email provider, that's okay. So in this unit, we are going to see how does an email look like. When we talk of an email, the electronic mail, what is its general structure? Okay, so that's what we are going to learn in this course or in this unit. So not much to do, just that parts of an email. Okay, the different parts that makes up an email. So I request that you still be with me up to the very end. Let's dive into it. Parts of an email. Now, the email, all emails, okay, be it from Yahoo, be it Gmail or any other provider, has got this structure. The first thing is the sender's email address. What do you mean by the sender's email address? Remember the email address that you created in unit 1 and also you created in unit 2? That's it. That's what we are talking about. That's your email address. When we talk of the sender, we are referring to you who is sending that email to somebody else. The sender's email address is part of your email. Okay, and in most cases it appears top. Okay, in some cases you might not see it when you are sending your email address. I mean, you are sending your emails. In some cases you might see it. In some email, with some email providers you might see it. In some email providers you might not see it. But whether you see it or you don't see it, know that it is there and it normally appears at the top most. Okay, then after the topmost email is said as email address, below that we have the email address of the receiver, or call him or her the recipient, the guy who is going to receive that email. The guy who you are sending the email address to is the one that we refer to as the receiver or the recipient. Okay, and if I was to give an example of Yahoo, okay, looking at the screen that I have here, these are just a screenshot of Yahoo mails. Okay, so here where you find it written to okay, this is where you type in the email address of the receiver. Okay, so assuming that you are sending that email address to me, my email address is arrostob, I mean ben@arrostob.co.ke. That's my email address, ben@arrostob.co.ke. So that's what you are going to write here, ben@arrostob.co.ke. And remember that when you are typing the email address of the receiver, it has to be in full. You don't cut it short. So if it is very lengthy, maybe a whole sentence, maybe, just kidding, anyway, it is going to be typed in at this point. All right, then as we discussed in unit 2, the CC stands for carbon copy. Okay, carbon copy, and we discussed that at length in unit 2. This is where you type in the email address of somebody else that you want this email gotten to. For example, if you are sending your email to more than 2 people, okay, you are maybe directing that email to me, your instructor, ben@arrostob.co.ke, and you want that email address to also be delivered to a colleague student, maybe example at domain.co.ke. All right, so that other student, you write his or her email address here. Okay, so this is the point. The CC, the carbon copy, well, this email address is not there intended for this person, but you just want them to know that I have sent this email to this guy. Let me give this example. Assuming that you are a student, okay, you are a student, and being a student, you are supposed to send an email to your lecturer. Okay, maybe you have an issue with your courses, or you have an issue with your marks or something of the sort. Okay, and you also want this email sent to your program advisor. You also want to your program advisor to know that you sent this email to your lecturer. Okay, so this is what you do. The email address of the lecturer will be at this point. Okay, So here where you have 2, this is where you have the email address of the lecturer. The email address of the program advisor will be at the CC. Okay, will be at the CC. Then below that we have the BCC. Okay, now BCC stands for blind carbon copy. Blind carbon copy. Now here is the difference. The CC, when you send an email address, when you send an email, sorry, and you include an email address at the CC, the receiver or the recipient of the email will see that that email was also sent to the person who appear at the CC, the person's email address appears at the CC. So the receiver of that email will be able to see that. But if you input the email address at the BCC, the other person whose the email is not intended to, you just want them to take note that you sent that email to the person you had or you are intending to send to. I hope that doesn't confuse you. Comes at the BCC, then the recipient, the one whose email address appears at this part here of the 2, will not see that this email was also sent to so and so. So maybe you are sending this email to somebody, but for confidentiality purposes or for privacy purposes, you also want this email noted by somebody else, okay, without the notice of the recipient, the main recipient of the email. So this is where you input the email address of that other person. Let me give you a good example. When you are talking, or if you're in an organization and you are head of a unit, or called maybe the head of a department, and you had scheduled a meeting with your team members, okay, and for one reason or the other, you want to reschedule that meeting, or you want to postpone that meeting for reasons that you could be holding. So you said you input the email address of your team members at this point here, okay, at the 2. Those are the main recipients of your email. And then you want a copy of the same, or you want that noted by the CEO. Just to give an example, you want the CEO to also note that the meeting that you had scheduled, you have postponed for various reasons, and that you have also notified the main members of your team. And you don't want the members of your team to know that you have notified the CEO about the postponement. So the email address of the CEO, you will input it at the point at the BCC, where you have the BCC, the blind carbon copy. So in that case, the main addressee or the main recipient of the email will not see that you also sent the same email to, or you notified the CEO about the postponement of the same email, or the same thing, that is the postponement. Or maybe let me give you another example. If you are a student, let me go back to the classroom setup, and maybe you are a student in a certain university, and you want to request your lecturer again that some marks are missing, of some marks of a certain unit are missing, and you also want your guardian or your parent to also note that, but you don't want your lecturer to know that your parents have also noted that, or you have also notified your parents that lecturer, my marks of this unit are missing. Okay, so you input the address of the lecturer at this point, the 2, that's the main recipient of this email. Then maybe the program advisor, her or his email address at this point where you see the CC. So in that case, the professor or your lecturer will see that the program advisor also received this email, and then the email address of your parent at BCC. So in that case, the program advisor and the professor or the lecturer will not see that your parents also received this email. Okay, so that's the second part of the email address, okay, of the email. So the email address of the receiver, or the email address of the recipient. Okay, that's how it looks like for for Yahoo. So let's look at how it looks like for Gmail. Okay, so for Gmail, it looks something like this. Okay, so you'll have the recipient's email address at this point. Okay, it also have the CC, okay, and the BCC. It's only that I have not included them here, but this is how the interface of the email the Gmail will look like when you are composing that email. It looks like this. So you input the recipient's email address, okay, and then you have the subject is the second thing, that thing that we are discussing, the subject line. Now the subject line, this refers to a one-line text that will appear first in the inbox of the receiver. By now you understand what we mean by the inbox. So when you set this email address to that receiver, the line, subject line, is the first line that the recipient will see even before he or she opens your email address. Okay, so before, when you send an email to me, okay, maybe you send an email to Arosto, when I open my email account and what I see that in the inbox I have got a new email from you, the subject line is what will appear first, and it appears in bold. So that's the first thing that appears, and the subject line is so much important. It is so much important that it makes, or it creates the curiosity of the recipient to read your email. So if you sent an email and maybe it's not something that you had discussed with the recipient before, the recipient will happen to read the subject line first, and that is what will make him or her get into your email, get to read your email. That's how important the subject line is. Okay, and so you have to make your subject line short and brief, very short and brief, so that the email recipient will just read through the subject line brief and be able to tell what does this email contain. Okay, before I even open it, what does it contain? All right, and the main goal of the subject line is to capture the attention of the recipient. Remember, I have mentioned that, and I want to insist on that because this is where majority of us go amiss. People just think that subject line is just any other line, it's any other statement, but they fail to understand how important the subject line is. It captures the attention of the recipient. So if your email, if your subject line, it's not very attractive, if it is vague, all right, then the recipient might decide to ignore the whole email. All right, and assuming, let me give this example, assuming that you have hundreds and hundreds of emails that you need to go through every morning. Okay, like myself, I have a number of emails that I do receive on a daily basis, and every morning before I do anything else, I have to go through, get into my inbox, email inbox, get to see what emails that I do have. Okay, and sometimes I have so many emails, and some of them I need to respond to, some others I don't need even to look at, some others I need not even to think about. You understand what I mean? And so for me to be able to know what it is in that email address, I get to read the subject line. And so the subject line is a very, very important thing to make. So if you are writing a professional email, if you are writing as that professional email, make sure that your subject line gives a hint. It gives a hint of what does this email contain. All right, more so if you had not communicated maybe via phone, or it is not a reply you are doing to an email. If your email is new to the recipient, then you have to ensure that your subject line gives a hint of what the email is all about. For example, if you are writing an email, you are applying for a job via email, okay, and you are so sure that these people need my services, and because they need my services, I have to write an email to them. So when you are sending that email, you have to ensure that your subject line captures in brief, okay, captures in brief that email contains an application of a job or a service that the company requires. Okay, so you have to make it very brief but at the same time it has to capture the hint that you want the recipient to take note of. If maybe you are writing a marketing email, okay, if you are writing a marketing email, again on the other hand, you have to make sure that this is well gotten. This one is very much understood by your recipient. All right, your recipient must be able to know or to take note that, you know what, that there is a marketing email and it has some products or services that I'm interested in too. All right, so that's how important a subject line is. So as you write your subject line, my good friend, make sure that number one is short and brief, okay, number two, it captures the attention of the recipient and it gives a hint of what it entails. All right, I hope you've gotten something. Good. Now that you have seen how important the subject line is, it's now time to look at the main part of the email, and that is the body. The body is basically the main part of the email. This is where the message that you want your recipient to get is held. This is where all the information that you wish to let your receiver to know, let your recipient to know is held. Okay, and this body is basically the main part. I want to repeat that because in case you are wondering, then where do you hold the information? Because remember, we talked of the subject line and we said that the subject line should be as short as possible, brief, but it should hint on what is expected into the main email. So this is where now the main email or the most information is held. Now the subject line, not the subject line, sorry, but the body normally starts with the salutation. Okay, you start with the salutation. Salutation refers to dear sir or madam. This is the greetings that you normally use. So if maybe it's you are writing to somebody that you don't know whether it's a he or a she, okay, maybe you are just given his designation or her designation, and you don't know whether it's a he or a she who is going to receive this email, then you can use dear sir, or you can say dear madam. Okay, this mostly happens when you are writing an email to a new person that you've never met, to a new person that maybe you have not even spoken on phone, or maybe to somebody very new to you, or allow me to say a stranger. Okay, and you don't know the gender, so in this case you use dear sir or dear madam as your salutation. Now if you are writing that professional email to an organization, okay, if you are writing that salutation to, you are writing that email to an organization, and maybe you know the person who is going to receive this email. In that case, then in such a scenario, then you can use their name and say, maybe for example you are writing to Arrosto, and so you can say dear Mr. Arrosto, or you can talk of something like dear Miss Arrosto. Okay, if you know the person that you are writing to, and you know the gender, their gender as well. Else, if you don't know their gender, if you don't know about the person or the gender of the person who is going to receive this email, then you can use a dear sir or dear madam. That is just a general salutation. It's also important to note that it is recommended, that I also advise it, that you try to keep your body short. Okay, try to keep your body short. So what do I mean by this? I don't mean that you don't communicate everything. That's not what I mean. What I mean by keeping it short is that communicate as much as you want, but again, avoid unnecessary repetition. Avoid repeating yourself so much in writing. Okay, that would make your email so lengthy, and once it becomes lengthy, the recipient might be bored when reading this email of yours. So in a professional email especially, just try to keep your email as short as possible, but again, know that this is the only opportunity that you have to communicate everything. So ensure that everything that you wanted your recipient to know, it's covered at this point, but again, avoid repeating yourself as much as possible. All right, but then, that having said that, it is also worth noting that you can create an external link, or that's a point, you can create an external link, or other than the external link, you can as well put a what do you call it, attach a web page, or maybe attach something, a link at that. in this point I'm talking of links. So you can create a link at this point. You can also make an attachment of a web page. Okay, remember, a web page, you just need to tag the web page address, and that's it. Okay, so that's about the body. Okay, we shall be discussing more about the body in a later unit in this course. So, but for now, know that this is the main part of the email address, and other than that, you begin with the salutations at all times. So you don't just dive into it and start typing in your message. Don't just go in and start writing your paragraphs. No, that's not what you do. You begin by greetings. Okay, and greetings is what we are referring to as salutation. So, and I have said that in case you don't know the recipient's gender, so you can use dear sir or madam. If you know the gender is a male but you don't know the name, you can talk of dear sir. If you know the gender is a female but you don't know the name, you can use dear madam. But for instances where you know the gender and also the name, you can refer to these people by their name. For example, dear Mr. Arrosto, dear Miss Arrosto. Then it is recommended and advised to try to keep your email as short as possible. That is very, very important. And the last thing to note about the body is that you can attach a link to a web page or an external link. Okay, an external web page and so on and so forth. All right, so that's it about the body. So the next thing is the second last part of the email, the sign off. Now the sign off is the second last part of the email. Remember, we are discussing the general structure of an email. Okay, the general structure of an electronic mail. So the sign off is the conclusion part of your email. Is the one that signifies that we have come to the end of the email. This is the end of my email, or this is the end of the information that I wanted you to take note of, my good recipient. Okay, and it is normally a concluding salutation. So this is where you conclude by use of words such as yours sincerely, kind regards, and so on and so forth. Okay, so sign off simply refers to the conclusion of the email and the salutation of your email. So it is normally that part where you conclude your email. Okay, and you do that by using salutations such as kind regards or with kind regards, yours sincerely, yours faithfully, and so on and so forth. Okay, and then lastly, the very last part of an email after the sign off is the attachment. The attachment, now this is a link. This is a link in form of a document. Okay, or this is a document that you want incorporated in your email. All right, I'll give you a good example. The document could be a Word document, could be a PDF, or could be a JPEG, or any image document. Now, if you are writing an email for a job application, okay, so you are applying for a job through an email, or you are writing an email, and you have your supportive documents, maybe your certificates that you acquired when you are in school, or maybe for other recommendation letters that you have received from other organizations that you have worked for, and you want the recipient of this email to also see. So those documents can be sent together with that email as an attachment. So this is where you link your document to your email. So they will not be treated separately. Okay, your email will be treated the same as your attachment, or your attachment and your email will be treated as one thing. It is one thing. Okay, so even if it's an external document, it's a document in Word or PDF or an image or whatever type of a document it is. It could be even an audio, it could be even a video, a clip that you've done, and you want that received, that too, the attachment and the email that you have composed will be treated as one thing. So there is no difference that will be created. Okay, and so that's it for this unit. My good students, I feel honored that you've come to this far. So in this email, we have covered the sender's email, we have covered about the receiver's email, we have talked about the subject line. Okay, and remember, we talked of the subject line as the most important. Okay, not the most important, but it is very, very important that as you select that subject line, it is the one that will build the curiosity. It's the one that will determine whether the recipient open your email or despises it, or maybe puts it on hold for some other time. Then you have the body. This is where you write all the information, but also remember to keep the body as short, but communicate everything and entirely everything that you needed your recipient to know without repeating yourself. Then we have the sign off, and the sign off is that part where you conclude your email just to show that thank you so much for reading my email, and you are sincerely, my name is so and so, and you conclude at that part. So then lastly you have the attachment, where you've talked about the attachment as that last document, that supportive document that you, or any other document, could not necessarily a supportive document, could be any other document that you want attached to your email, and the receiver, you want him or her to read about it. So that's it for the unit 3. I hope that you will join me for the unit 4. Thank you so much for coming this far. Having come this far, I can tell you that you don't want to miss what unit 5, unit 4-5 has for you. Okay, please keep up the spirit. I feel honored that you are still together with me. So in the next unit we are going to cover we are going to do a bit of practice. Now remember, you created an email address, you registered an email account, so we are going back to that email. Now using what we have learned, you are going to send a demo email. All right, so there'll be a question, not a hard one, and you are going to do that practice, and you are going to see how you fare. So expect something to do with practicals. Okay, and I hope that you do it. So see you in the next unit, my good friend.